We're out of the rain right now. I think we're supposed to get it back for a minute. And I think around Friday or Saturday at least. I'm grateful. I'm not complaining, but it's nice to see the sunshine.
Dr. Dub talks very lightly.
Yes, yes, she
I'm
does.
going to have to make some adjustments, guys. I'm sorry about the noise.
Right. Yes, she does.
Check one, two.
I'm glad they passed that bill last night so the people can get their money. You hear me?
Check one, two, 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 two.
So that they could, the government and all like that. That mess we got going on in Washington.
Check one, two. Hey, hey, hey. One, two, one, two, one, two.
Right. Well, that and also like the men and women that's overseas in the armed forces and things like that. Yeah. So they have it until November, something like 45 days
Check one, two.
to go back to pay
Yeah. Take this down. Since he's not using that. That may allow her to get closer. Check one, two. See how loud we can get this bad boy. Maximum I can go. Hello, welcome 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
And so you work with the
Check 1, 2.
audio visuals for the major concerts at the major.
Correct. So the organization, I think you and I had this conversation. The organization is called IATSE, and it stands for International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees. They are the ones that are on strike right now with Hollywood.
Right.
Actually, they're settling our deal now. They actually are closing that. And then the Actors Guild went on strike after that, so we need both of those to close so we can start doing movies again. So concerts, movies, broadcasts, theaters, television, any venue. Personally, I'm a business agent for IATSC now, so we just did myself. I just did 39 contracts in my first 2 years.
That's cool.
But there's over 100 some contracts just in the city of Philadelphia alone. So you know what my focus is. Bring us in. I'm bringing them in and train them as fast as I can, shipping them out as fast as I can.
You know what? Are you from Fisher Home, Philadelphia? Okay. You know what? Years ago, because a lot of those the older ministers that had their mega ministries on TV, like Kenneth Copeland.
Yep.
Honey, they rolled around with
Check 1, 2.
With their teams.
That's correct. So that's the next place that I want to.
And Kenneth Hagan. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Mighty
Check 1, 2.
That's
Heard of which one was that?
wait a minute. Phil Driscoll, the Mighty Horn. Pull him up on any one afternoon.
I will. I'll look at
Because he could blow that that horn and them trumpets.
Nice.
And he comes from that world where he was played in the band. They had the smoke and
Check.
all the rhythm and blues concerts, the smoke, the rain coming up, all like that. But he had gotten into the church and saved, and he didn't throw away his talent.
Good.
He come to the city,
Good.
Delaware with the track. All them people, they had their team
Yes.
and what have you. So I got you. Because they brought their singers too. I mean, everybody came with all of that.
That's correct.
You saw them tractor trailers rolled up and down them highways with those names on them. Said, here they come. Getting ready, so.
Yeah, we do them all. We do, you know, and they're a lot bigger shows than they were back then.
Oh, yeah.
So back then, a normal show was 4 trucks at the Wells Fargo Center, which used to be the first year, and the Spectrum, you remember the Spectrum. 4 trucks was the most you did. We just did Kirk Franklin's 16 trucks. Beyonce's 150 trucks.
God.
With Taylor Swift, 200 tractor trailers.
Tractor trailers.
You're talking 300 individuals from the city of Philadelphia that are required to have talent and skill, work for one day, and it's a great living, but you have to be immediately skilled and able to work that day.
And everybody had their category. They have to stay and stay in because it's
dangerous. It's a very dangerous industry. And when I tell you, on our load is, if you look around, there's emergency 911 response at every corner. You sweat too much. They'll come over and check your dehydration.
They should.
Because the insurance, nothing to care about it. But the insurance is so high. Man, it's on it. It's paperwork. Yeah.
You couldn't call like watch yourself if I didn't see you. How you doing? I pulled my number.
I said,
I
was gonna call you when I got. I said, I didn't see your car out there. I said, I'm gonna call her when I get in here.
I'm good. Yeah, good, man. My health was up and everything. So what? I said, your health was up and everything.
As far as I know.
All right, so
You still on top?
you still taking 2, huh?
Yes.
All right, we got 1 minute counting. 3 minutes, I'm sorry, 3 minutes. 3 minutes of counting. 3 minutes of counting.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, they did, man.
Yeah, that's a whole lot of people for one show.
For one show.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, and it pays.
I believe it.
Wow.
And I'm telling you,
good.
it pays great.
Yes.
So,
a lot of people.
So if we could put it, and our kids, our young kids are interested in it. But what hurt this year is while I was campaigning, I have, our board has approved 30% of our recruitment to go towards the African American community within our area. That's what I've been pushing for. I finally get it, and Hollywood went on strike. So when Hollywood went on strike, I wasn't able to use the kids I recruited. All the Hollywood people came back and went to work.
Right.
So the calls I get from the young brothers is, Kareem, what you doing? You got me on, I'm on train and I'm not working.
You couldn't do anything until, and now they working on the actors now.
And the actors are in the way at the moment. But like, this should all be solved. Their budget season is the end of October, November. They're going to fix this before that money is released. That's
And
definitely.
I'm glad those people went on strike because the little people are the ones that
They weren't, and that's why we didn't cross their line.
That's good.
Because these guys are not, 90% of that group doesn't qualify for health coverage. 90% of the writers don't qualify. That's not right. So we pushing for them. So we respected the line, but that caused that trickle down where Philadelphia people that we recruited weren't able to come legally to work. But I'm hoping next, right after November, I can incorporate them into the deal. We'll see. We'll see.
So I'll introduce you.
Please, please.
So I don't have to get rid of that.
No young women just men.
Not men. No, we are all are included. All are included. Please, we emphasize from women. We emphasize from recruit. We want more women. Most of the time, they get around us and they feel like I don't want to be here. But if we can get them to try it out, I think they will see that it's a great living. It's a great living.
I think that's
You have to feel comfortable.
Once you get comfortable with this round, you just gotta understand it's dangerous and it's some heavy materials. You gotta be, just know that this is happening around you. And then after that, they get it. They're like, okay, I can do this. But you need that little push.
Exactly.
All right. So we're at.
I think you.
4 o'clock.
I think you should.
Second.
Let me
go live.
You should sit here.
All right, we're gonna go live.
Yeah. Huh? No, you just please.
In 10,
We'll work it out. You sit there.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5.
Habarigani. All right. Thank you, brothers and sisters. We want to thank you for coming to this book signing. My name is Molefi Kete Asante, and we welcome our entire YouTube audience, the people who are on live streaming, and those who have come here today. This is, of course, a momentous time, and we are deeply happy to be on this program and talking to you at a time that there's revolution in Africa. Revolution is on the rise in Africa. We appreciate the young people who have taken on the remarkable drive for a revival of the African spirit and African culture. In Burkina Faso, in Niger, those of you who are in Senegal and in Ghana and even in Nigeria and other places throughout the African continent who are speaking your voice and are telling the truth to the neo-colonialists and to the colonialists. We are proud of you. We are thankful for you. We knew that the strong men and the strong women would keep coming on because our ancestors predicted that you were born to be leaders and to raise the questions that those before you have raised. We have raised those questions, seeking for freedom and seeking for a true understanding of African history and culture. And we have not had that in the past like we should have had. We have had people who have kowtowed to the powers of the colonialists, whether they were French, whether they were Arabs, whether they were people who were in Britain or the United States government, or whether they were people who represented the Russian Wagner group or any of these groups, Portuguese and Spanish, and all these people who have gained power and influence and gained a sense of their own importance by actually downgrading, degrading, dehumanizing, and walking over African bodies and spirits. Long live the young men and women of Africa who are raising up and who are asking the questions that should have been asked long time ago. We're in a moment of neo-colonialism and neoliberalism, which has really stripped Africa and African people of culture and of a sense of history. And what we are seeing now is a remarkable return to the historical place of African people at the very beginning and origin of human civilization. We have to redress the issues that have been created by the last 500 years of dislocating African people so that we no longer know the names of our own God. And we no longer know our own names. That's why we still call ourselves sometimes John and Barbara, and, and Sheila, and so on, because we forgot our names. We don't know them. And so to see young men and young women in these West African countries, truly, who are telling the French that the time is over. But they're also not only just telling the French that time is over, they're telling the Americans time is over for exploitation, for the fact that people have come into Africa, and they have taken the diamonds, just like the Russians are doing in Sonafrique, the Central African Republic. They have come in like the Belgians did before in the Belgian Congo and took over the rubber and took over the ivory. And they're coming in, and they have come in to take over uranium and all of the precious metals of Africa, and to leave Africa as a continent poorer than they found it. If the French had been in Niger and in Cote d'Ivoire and in Benin and all these countries for hundreds of years and have not been able to change the living conditions of the people of Africa, that means that they have been exploiting the people of Africa, and they have not been truly trying to work for the interests of African people themselves. So I'm very happy. I see the revolution in these young people, and may they all continue to read Afrocentric works. One of the letters that I've received recently talked about how they have been inspired by the work that the Afrocentrists have done, because the Afrocentrists have always said only one thing, and that is that we find truth when we look at our own historical experiences. There are no truths any better, any greater. There's no grass any greener than when you look and interrogate, that is, question your own experiences, your own history, your own sages, your wise women and wise men who have lived in these countries and who have fought against the colonialists, neo as well as the ones who were real. And then now we have a great sense of victory and power that is great for African people. This is the newness that we need. This is the victory that we need. So I'm delighted that these young people are rising up in Africa and raising the questions. We give a shout out to them. And we hope that the old guard in West Africa and throughout the continent of Africa, that the old guard will encourage these young people. Yeah, we know that sometimes the old guard has been a little weak and a little timid, and they don't want to necessarily upset the colonial powers, but the colonial powers need to be upset. You need to turn them over, and you need to turn them out, and that's basically what is happening throughout the continent of Africa. I'm very, very happy about it, and every day I read a new statement or a new understanding, and this is happening not just in West Africa, it's happening also in East Africa as well, in Sudan and these countries. And so we're very grateful for the people of Mali also, because they're doing the same thing. They're raising these questions. You can't have a country like France in your country for hundreds of years and the living conditions, the standard of convenience and comfort and organization of the country remains the same as it was when they got there. That means that they're giving all the advantages to France. They're not giving advantages to the people that they are basically robbing. And this is true with the Americans. The same is true with America. If the Americans are there and they've been there for 100 years and the condition of the people is still the same, then that means that those people have not been doing what they should be doing. They are basically living off of African people. So that's the thing that it was on my mind today, and I know that we have a powerful, wonderful conversation that we're going to have today, and I'm very, very pleased to say that I'm sharing the platform with one of the great scholars of our time, and that is Dr. Na Dove. Dr. Na Dove is the author of a number of books, including African Mothers, which was one of the earliest studies done on the tremendous power of African mothers. And she did this study when she was working. She worked at Temple years ago in the 90s. And we are very, very proud of her for that work. But she's also written the book, The Afrocentric School, which is the first book written about Afrocentric schools and about how you create an Afrocentric school. People talk about Afrocentric education but don't know anything about it. But she's taught us what Afrocentric education is about. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a powerful record of what she has done and accomplished. But in addition to that, she has written many articles, particularly dealing with the question of the two-cradle theory that Sheikh Anta Diop has talked about. She's one of the first people I met who was not just talk about Sheikh Anta Diop, but she wrote about him. She studied his works. Because sometimes people tell you things like, oh boy, I read Yosef Ben Yakanan's book. Well, and then you talk to them and they didn't read it. They just heard somebody else. People do me like that all the time. Say, I read such and such and such. Well, they didn't really read it, because if they read it, they would understand so much more about what, Afrocentricity is. People just heard it. They heard a voice and somebody said, this is what it is, or this is what somebody else said it is. But I always tell people, you go to the primary sources all the time. And Dr. Dove is a primary source for us understanding the work of Marxism, the work of womanism. She is among the leaders in terms of African womanism. So that's one thing. I'm happy to be on this program with her. But I just want to share with you how we're going to do this. This is a book sign. This is not even supposed to be lectures. But I just was full today, and I just wanted to talk about these young revolutionaries in Africa. I'm just so proud of them. It's a credit to the African ancestors that young people are rising up and are raising questions that the older people should have asked. And sometimes, and we have to not. I don't want to throw away the old people, because certainly some of them did what they could. I started to say they did what they could. No, some of them did what they could. Others didn't do what they could, but some of them attempted to do what they could. But the young people are inspired by Lumumba, and they're inspired by Cabral, and they're inspired by Sankara. And they're Nyeri and Nkrumah and those early leaders who fought against colonialism. They're inspired by Samora Machel. You see, these early revolutionaries who were in the streets and in the forest and in the mountains fighting against the colonialists. So today we have Sister Joyce, who is really an outstanding educator herself. And she is a responsible person who has done a lot for education in the Philadelphia region. And I first met her when she was running a school in Camden, and she's going to be the one who is going to raise questions to Dr. Dove and myself. And then we'll answer those questions. We won't be long because, as I said, we'll each take about 10 minutes and say our words. And then after that, we'll have Sister Joyce to ask us our questions. So the first thing is, I think, Dr. Dove, you want to go first? Okay, well, then I got to change gears. Okay, tell you what this is about. And then I'll go first, 10 minutes. And then Dr. Dove will speak for 10 minutes. And then Sister Joyce will introduce questions for us, and then there may be a couple of questions out of the audience. The main book that we have talked about today, we'll talk about today, some of you have the book already, some of you will get it, and those of you who are on the streaming, you can get it from Amazon.com. It's a book called Being Human Being. Transforming the Race Discourse. And this book is written by both of us. And that means that the structure of this book was, once we got the idea, which was mainly generated by me discussing with Dr. Dove some of the issues that I had never talked about very much myself in my own work, and that is the caste system of India. That was one of the things that really struck me, because we talk a lot about race in the U.S., but she was familiar with this. And so we had these conversations. And so out of that grew this question of how do we approach this issue of race in the American society, in the Western society, and where does the concept of race come from? Who structured it? Who first created it? Why did they create it? What was their interest? I mean, black people didn't do it. We didn't go around and say we're gonna create a system and call it race, and this is how it's gonna be. We didn't do that. Who made those classifications? Why did they make those classifications? What was the political, the economic, the social, the spiritual interest that these people had that made them think that they had to create this notion of race and create racism and create this structure and so forth. So out of that came a discussion that I had with Dr. Dove about the whole concept of the racial ladder. So this question of the caste system of India, and we'll talk more about that, and I'm sure in our question and answer period, about the race structure, that notion of the Varna, that's what they call it. The word in India is Varna, V-A-R-N-A, is not caste. We say in English caste, but how that system played out, and why did it play out in India the way it played out? I did an article recently, and you may have seen it in the Philadelphia Tribune, on the new racism of Vivek Ramaswamy. And I explained to the people that Vivek Ramaswamy sees himself in the context of the Hindu ideology of being a Brahmin. And to be a Brahmin means that you're above all the other castes. And not only are you above all the other castes, but he can play right into the Trumpism that's in American society. So you got two things coming in play with Vivek Ramaswamy. You got the racism of white supremacy, and you got the racism of the Varna system also operating, where there are Brahmins in the American society who don't want to have anything to do with people who are called Sudras in their caste. So all these things are going on. You see what I'm saying? But we need to understand this. If we don't understand this whole structure of the caste system, then we don't understand this concept of ranking of human beings on the base of complexion and on the base of physical characteristics, because that's the key to this. That's the core of it. And this classification system, deeply embedded in the ideology of the West, lot of it is coming from people like Charles Darwin. And we'll talk about that. And still eugenics and all those movements. That's all in the minds of these white races who think basically that white people are superior to everybody else. We have to deal with this, and that's what we try to deal with in the book. That's just a little bit of it. So I'll stop here and let Dr. Dove make her statement, and then after that we'll ask Joyce if she would come up and she would give us the questions. All right, Ms. Joyce. Okay, so.
Welcome, everybody. Can you hear? Welcome, everybody. It was a great, it is a great privilege and honour to be here today to discuss this book. This book is really a gathering of ideas between Dr. Asante and myself, using Afrocentric theory, meta theory, and bringing in Sheikh Anta Diop's work on the two cradle theory. So it's kind of part of the Afrocentric meta theory. So it is within that theory that Diop is embraced and loved. Outside this particular discipline of Africology, his character is besmirched, and all the work that he's done, which is a lifetime work in trying to look at why are we where we are today, and to look at culture as a way of defining how we think about things, its impact on our mind and behavior, and how we have come to be the people we are today. It really comes under the killing and murder of George Floyd that we sat down together and said, well, you know, let's write something in relation to this murder, which in of itself is not strange. It's been happening for hundreds of years to African people in America. But the difference in this one was that it was on camera and not hidden. There was nobody who could say that what you saw was not real. And it became a global sort of event where people began to say, people from all different parts of the world began to question America's policy on black people and understand more clearly the types of murders that were going on. So it escapes from the clutches of those who try to justify this type of behavior is very necessary, because African people are brutes and savages and barbarians, which is what was said about the First Nations people of this land, who were also murdered mercilessly in the Americas, across the Americas, by Europeans coming together. So we are looking at the significance of culture in this, its impact on humanity and our behaviors. So we begin really, or central to our discussion is the two cradle theory, which is the belief, the theory that there are essentially two cultures, and that these two cultures are created by the smallest units of humanity, which are the woman and man, who are the creators of life and also the creators of culture. Now, it seems very simplistic, because everybody says there are thousands of cultures and languages and people, and you can't just bring it to two. But we know that the distinctions between these two cultures can appear in many, many forms, so that there can be part of the work of Afrocentricity is to be able to look at similitude, similar ways of thinking and behaving across the whole of the African world, which we find all the time. So even though there will be differences in the spiritual systems and particular traditions and rituals, essentially the love of ancestors, the love of children, the love of nature, the equality and respect for the woman are features of the culture, of the two cradle theory, of the culture that comes from Africa. Africa being the birthplace of humanity. And that first culture that was born in Africa amongst the original people is considered to be a southern cradle culture that is born of the the reciprocity and search for harmony between women and men, the creators of life and culture. And then, so when we look at 350,000 years ago, people say, well, what's relevant about that to us living now? But the thing is that when we're trying to look at the story of humanity, we can't just begin in different places and say, this is it. We actually have to go to the roots of why we are the way we are today. So out of Africa, there were migrations of African people who settled in the whole world. So every phenotype that left Africa, or the one human race that left Africa and became many phenotypes also in Africa, are of African origin. So this is why we had to look at, well, if we're all African, why are we so different? And what Europeans have done, who came, who can be linked to the northern cradle, which is where thousands of years later, the relationship between the woman and the man, the creators of life, changed because of some of the difficulties and hardships of those people traversing the world and finding places to live. And so it's seen that way by Job, and the thing is that it all makes sense. And so the domination of the woman, one can see as the first hierarchy and the first injustice. And out of this northern cradle foundation of the different relationship between the woman and man, one of oppression, one of domination, you will see that the type of culture that comes out of that is one of aggression, because you have to be a liar and ready for war and ready for deceit and the things that can maintain your power over another person's power. So Job related that to the smallest unit of every culture in these two cultures. So the northern cradle culture came out thousands of years later. And often people don't understand this in the translation of Job's work from French. They often think that these two cradles existed side by side simultaneously, and effectively they're going into the theory of polygenesis, where there are different places that races evolved from, and that you can identify them mainly based on skin color and certain hair types and so on. And these ideas are the foundation of the construction of race. So we understand when we read Job correctly, we know that he said life began in Africa. That is the origin of humanity. We know he's saying that, so why would he then say that there are these two races specifically dealing with each other? He told us there's one race. Scientifically, we know that, and he was a scientist, and he was working with the genetic people, geneticists, and understood this one race theory. And many people don't want to believe that because there have been so many heinous crimes that have been committed, and those of us who love Africa and African people find it hard to think that there are people who were originally African and have become murderers and colonists and crazy people conquering the world and so on, going back to their original home and taking it from their ancestors without even knowing their relationship to their ancestors. So we look at the northern cradle as a place where ideas of subservience, domination, aggression arose. And Job talks about the xenophobic idea of fear of other. And of course you would fear other, because if you're doing things that are wrong, and we do have a standard for right and wrong that comes out of Africa that can give us a way of judging what is right and wrong. And we say in Afrocentricity that Ma'at is our standard from ancient Africa, is the codified version of what was happening across Africa before Kemet or ancient Egypt existed. And so in doing that, we have a set of standards, and we can say, like Job said, that this behavior is incorrect. And so out of that, we can say, we can deduce that race, the hierarchicalization of humanity, is an incorrect understanding of humanity. And so this is its origin. Today, just briefly, we are in a situation where these two major cultural forms have come together. So there are African people, First Nations people, who still practice the ways of Africa, even though they were phenotypically different, perhaps, and not even that, according to Dr. Imhotep. There were many black Indians at the time of the genocide of the First Nations people, some of whom are still living in their sacred lands away from people. So we look at the zone of confluence is what Job calls when these two cultures come together. And so we could actually use that concept and say, this is what's happening here, and what has happened in Africa and other parts of the world, that there is a war between these two cultures. And the dominant culture in every single one of these places is the Northern Cradle culture, the one of domination and aggression, because it has no rules. It says it has rules, it writes rules, but they are not relevant. They never happen unless something untoward happens and it's convenient for it to happen. So we're in a situation where the First Nations people, the African people who were enslaved and brought to the Americas, have some vestiges of the ancient traditions, and there are certain ways that people have been able to survive by bringing those African isms into play. And so the dominant group right now is trying to stop all of that. And in order to do that, it must reiterate the importance of race, because race will keep us all into our little categories. We will look at each other and we will judge each other on the race idea. And so amongst ourselves, we hierarchicalize ourselves completely using the model of the race paradigm. So we can never know, are we for Africa or against Africa? Do we believe in Africa? Do we have African values and beliefs? Because we're looking at each other and making these judgments as to how near or far we are racially to the controllers and to the victims, and making judgments on that. And that is very difficult to do. And in fact, the race paradigm has problems because it does that almost religiously. And so it can never account for people who are not in that, who do things that do not fit into the race paradigm. Because culture is something that is flowing and moving it has characteristics, it has values, beliefs, it has traditions. All of these are in our minds. We activate them. And so we're in a situation where the mind is the battleground for sanity. And here we are with these wars going on, but we have to be able to understand them, uncover them, and go back historically to know where we are in all of this. And so that's part of the reason that we wanted to, Dr. Asante and I wanted to express our beliefs and ideas about dismantling ideas like this, or talking about what is race, and it's a global thing, of course.
We're going to ask Ms. Joyce Johnson, who is a psychotherapist. I hope she won't do any psychoanalysis of us, but we will ask her to come up and she can ask questions.
You want me to sit? What you want me to do?
Grab that microphone, and then you guys can answer from the left.
Okay, I'll just sit back here.
Is it on? To the left a little bit, from some in front of the speaker. It's already on. It's on? Yeah. Right there's first.
Hotep family. It's an honor to be here and to have been asked to participate in this event today. So the first question has to do with what inspired the book, and Dr. Dove kind of spoke to that regarding the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. So I don't know if Dr. Asante, you want to further expound on that?
Only to just a small degree. And Dr. Dove did cover it very well. She mentioned that there had been many incidents of murder of black people. And in this particular case, what we saw was the arrogance of the man who murdered him. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that in a nutshell, was part of the idea behind, why was the hatred so vile? What was this about truly? And that's where we wanted to get into this question of race and the idea that just looking at a black person sometimes, if you're a white policeman, may very well send you off. I've had those experiences, you see. So, and I'm sure other people have. We know what racism does, with particularly if white people, the ones who take to heart this notion that somehow there's a white supremacist view and reality. Which, of course, we know there is not, but that's what they think. And so this is where the battle always comes between African people and white people, is that you meet a black person who says, no, I don't accept you as being superior to me. That's right. That's a big battle. So the George Floyd murder was very important to us. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Next one.
Thank you, Bo. Dr. Dove, did you want to add anything else? Or? You don't have to.
Is there anything I should?
No, you don't have to, Dr. Dove, if you don't want to. We can just go to the next question. Okay. What do you mean by the racial ladder, and how is it articulated in ordinary life?
Yeah, I think that I touched on that a little bit. The racial ladder is almost like, like a step ladder where you have the lowest rung and you have the highest rung. What the Europeans set up was a structure with Europeans at the top. The way they did it was to say the Europeans were at the top, and among Europeans there was also a hierarchy. there was, of course, the Aryans and the Nordics at the top. That is, a sort of northwestern Europeans were at the top. Then the Mediterranean Europeans were second. Those people came in like the second, and then the third they had the Mediterranean white people like Italians and Portuguese and so on. They claimed they were below the Nordics and below the second, the Gauls and those people. You see. And then below them, they then went around the world and said then there were Asians, and then below them they would say Africans and native peoples at the bottom. That was that they operated on the basis of that lie, but that's the lie that is still in the schools, it's still in the court systems, it still exists. I mean. Despite the fact that there have been many examples of proof that it doesn't exist, that is not correct. I mean, and certainly Letitia James and Fannie Willis are showing that, you know, you can say what you want to say about the racial ladder, but we are as good a lawyers as you will find anywhere in the world. So that's what's happening now. The racial ladder is being challenged, and that challenging that racial ladder creates real problems for white people who believe in white superiority because it doesn't exist. There's no such thing as that. And they know it doesn't exist more and more. And this is why the anger with black people. You have now in the United States the top citizen in charge of the Defense Department is Lord Austin. He's a black man. And the top military person in America is now Charles Q. Brown. He's a black man. So now you got the Joint Chief of Staff in the United States military is a black man. You got the Secretary of Defense for the United States is a black man. So you know that this is creating real issues in Iowa and in Nebraska and in Georgia and Alabama and places like that. So this is because what is being shown is that the racial ladder that they carry around in their brains and have carried around so long in their brains is fake. It's a farce. You see.
Thank you, Dr. Asante. I'd just like to add to that racial ladder that it is not only Europeans who use it to their own advantage. You know, you can find the racial ladder inside holy texts. Yes. Yeah. And where people are condemned, African people, black people are condemned in certain religions to be the slaves of everybody else. So, you know, when we're looking at that ladder, we can apply it to different groups of people who place that wherever, we tried to say that wherever black people are at the bottom of a hierarchy, like the hierarchy of class, for instance, in those of us who believe that class is the strongest oppression, those of us who believe that often do not understand the history of working people who have committed heinous crimes against the blackest skinned working people. We can look at gender and find the same thing. So it's not about just saying we're all one gender, we're all one class, we're all one race, we're all one sexuality. It's not about that. If the blackest person is on the bottom, then we have to look at all these hierarchies in terms of race, which all these hierarchies are as wrong and as evil and as backward as the race hierarchy, because none of them are grounded in the truth of what is of humanity. What is it to be a human being? We looked at, in this race hierarchy, we looked at Ma'at, as I said before, as a set of standards that we would use to say that in order to become human, you would have to practice Ma'at, the ancient African principles, and so that there's a route to becoming human, and at the same time we recognize what it is to be inhuman, because the standards are already set. And so that in part is what we have striven to do through understanding this ladder, this racial hierarchy, to show the inhumanity of people who actually believe this to be correct. It is immoral and against the ancient principles of truth and justice. And that's wanted to add, it's not just Europeans.
Thank you both. The next question: how do you create a society where human beings are valued as being human?
Throwing me under the bus. It is a process, first of all. Africology is one such form. It is an educational form, and education is the key to consciousness and the key to enlightenment. And when we talk about education, we're not talking about this false thing where people, young ones, go to school and they're kept in these places for hours on end to learn things that aren't true about their own humanity or anybody else's humanity. We're talking about education, which is learning. It's a lifelong experience of growing to understand who one is. So, schools, education, schools that can do this already exist. They are in the minority, but these are the Afrocentric, African-centered schools that have been around for some time, at least 60s, and are now being looked at in Africa. So we do have some sort of, positive. What Job wanted us to understand is that culture informs the institutions of every society, so that they love the humanity that produced them. So the institutions of family, of politics, of health care, of economics, of education, should reflect the culture that developed them. And in this case here, we are in that situation where the culture is one that despises African humanity. And so every institution makes it very difficult for black people inside them who need to operate and do their work. So you have prison systems that are overloaded with black women and black men, and you have health care systems where it's very difficult for a black woman to be able to have a child and live, or have that child live, compared to other people. You have an education system where children leave not knowing who they are, and in some cases hating who they think they are, when really they're not these people. So I think, or we think that education is key, and that dismantling these ideas is just about having truth, using truth as the weapon. And, of course, it's hard to do this because we're in a society that doesn't want to do this. As we see, say, in Florida, where Dr. Asante's books are banned, and the history of the First Nations people of that area is completely non-existent, and that the fear of the people always seems to be, we don't want black people to know this history. But in reality, you don't want white people to know this reality. That's the problem. That's the real problem, but it's masked in race and all those types of things. So we're thinking, it's just the broadness, So in some ways we can say that this thinking, this dismantling, is already happening. And this is a time in which it is happening. For instance, we have, the situation in the Sudan, which means land of slaves, where these ancient people gave us the principles of Ma'at and are now still being enslaved. And we're looking at ourselves and saying we're no longer enslaved. Our minds are, but we're not realizing that enslavement is still going on in different parts of Africa. And so we wanted to really broaden the idea of the construct of race to understand, the crimes still being committed under our very noses amongst our own people. But what is happening is the people of Sudan know that they are Nubian, know that they are Kushites. This is a big danger for those who are the Arabized Africans who are trying to maintain control over the people's minds. And so they are knowing this. And so these types of knowledge are being shared and people are using them. So we cannot rise up today and take over, because we will do exactly what our conquerors do, because in the main, that's what we believe in. So it is a process, an educational, spiritual, institutional, but we can do it, and we have to be patient to say, in our lifetime, we will do as much as we can in any of these institutions that we work in to make the changes according to how we understand we can do this. And we are not alone. We are a world people.
Thank you, Dr. Dove. Doctor, just two more questions. Okay. What did the ancient Greeks think about the African people? Do you feel like that was already covered?
That's fine. They thought the ancient African people were their fathers and mothers. That's what they thought of it. I mean, and Herodotus says this, of course, in his book 2 of the Histories. He said that even the gods of Greece came from Africa. Even their gods. When we say Athena, and we say that one of the writers wrote a book called Black Athena, his name was Martin Bernal, a great scholar. I met him once, and we were in a conference in Barcelona together, and I said, why would you name your book Black Athena? He says, because Athena was black. The name of Athens itself comes from a black goddess. That's why the book is called Black Athena. And he's correct. When I went back and searched it out, yeah, lo and behold, Herodotus in the 5th century BC wrote about this. All the gods we got. In fact, Homer even writes about Zeus being in Ethiopia. So now you got a problem. You've created this notion that Greek civilization is at the very beginning of history. And all of a sudden we know from reading, and they were saying all this when we couldn't read. For 246 years in the United States of America, it was illegal to teach black people to read or write. So we were blinded. We didn't even know. And on the continent of Africa, when they colonized us, they taught us their language, whether it was English or French or Arabic. So we didn't know our own knowledge, our own information. So yes, indeed, the Greeks honored the African traditions and respected them. They said that solemn processions, like graduation exercises that we have these days, all kinds of parades where you have drummers and musicians, all of that, they said, came from the Africans. You see, many more things. One day we'll give a talk about what Herodotus found in Africa, you see, because you need to know that. It needs to be common knowledge. And if you got a book, the book Histories, it could be in some secondhand bookstore, Histories. The book 2, that's like chapter 2 of that book, is all about what the Greeks learned from Africa. Okay? Thank you.
Dr. Dove, you want to make any comments?
Okay.
Okay. Last question. As we see, the revolution is being televised and documented. How does Afrocentricity understand race at this moment and moving forward?
All right, well, you know,
You get all the hard questions.
I'm just going to make it sort of personal in the department. As a professor, that's what I teach. Because one, you know, we cover all the boundaries in our department, but culture has always been very, very important, and now it's important for I say children because I'm quite aged, as you can tell, but they are students. It's important for them to understand the same thing that our book says. In fact, we try to ask them to get that book to really become updated with how the significance of culture has played a major role. It's always played a role, but there are some clear things, and it's helpful for the young ones, the children, wherever we are, whatever we're doing, that we put forward truth. And Afrocentricity is spreading. It's not just contained in the department. We have Dr. Asante has at least 145, is it, doctorates who have left the department and have become very powerful all over the world. So even though it's a tiny little place, and it's being destroyed and made smaller every minute as we speak, and people are under threat, as they always have been, because it is a department that teaches truth, and we can't have that. It's good to know that there have been people that have left there, and they are practicing, they're understanding, and they're teaching. And in South Africa, you've been asked on a number of occasions to come, and actually change universities to enable universities to teach Afrocentric ideas in the disciplines, or the discipline of Africology. So I think that's what you're asking, is it? But
Great response.
thank you.
Dr. Asante.
Thank you so much, and we want to thank Ms. Joyce Johnson for moderating this. We're going to have a few minutes for questions. Are there any questions online? There are a couple of questions online.
Similar to what
To the same questions, okay? So we're going to ask you, Ms. Johnson, if you would, don't mind taking the microphone to.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Yeah, this was an outstanding lecture and response, and we're certainly appreciative of all the information that was given today. One question, how and where did racism begin?
How and when did racism begin? Let the authority.
Well, it began in the Northern Cradle era of domination and aggression against the woman, which can be seen in holy texts, that she is the first sinner. And if she's not the first sinner, she's definitely has many sins against her character. And it's a sort of biological thing, but it is the first hierarchy which created the ideas of, as we said, aggression, lies, hypocrisy, greed, individualism, all the things that we know that come out of the Northern Cradle. Race is one of them, because it fits the scenario of behaviors and thoughts that hierarchicalize humanity. The first hierarchy, from what we find through Job's work, is the domination of the woman. And then later in the holy text, we see how the man, Noah's son, Ham, is now responsible for all black people being enslaved to his brothers. So these are stories that supported the later construction of race as a concept, as a word. You find that the ships carrying African people en masse have holy names to them. So we know there's a connection. We can't just say that because the word race was invented 500 years ago by all the pseudoscientists, that that's the beginning of race. The beginning of race, if you're looking culturally, is when the patriarchal culture defined humanity, beginning with the woman. So the hierarchy of race comes out of the hierarchy of humanity, beginning with the woman. This is how it became real, and the holy texts support that cultural belief. And so this is why we look at culture so deeply, because otherwise we can never know where race comes from. We can always say it's a social thing. But then it means that it has no beginning and no end, and anyone can practice it at any time. And that's not true. There have been people for thousands of years who didn't know race, who didn't practice race, who didn't believe in race, who didn't believe in hierarchies, who didn't believe in domination in these ways. So this is what we're saying in the book.
Thank you very much for that. If I could add to that, because it's a very, very good point. Homo sapiens, as we've said, start in Africa. There are no humans before those Homo sapiens. So all Homo sapiens started in Africa. The 8 billion people on the earth today had origin in Africa. That's where we all come from. So Africans lived for thousands of years without the concept of race. We knew there was difference in people. Some people were short, some people were tall, some were lighter complexion than others, some were dark. But Africans never put a ranking on those people to say if you were this, if you had these kind of eyes, then you were a higher race or a lower race. We never did that. That was not an African idea, an African concept. And yet we do know by the Rig Vedas and the religion of the Indians that they created a whole caste system that was structured on physiology, based on the darker you are, the lower you down you are, and that's mainly because of the invasion of the Aryans into the subcontinent of India, in which they dominated them and then imposed a religion on them that made the religion one where if you were of a lower caste, you could never change it, and you could never change it because it was your sacred duty to remain whatever you were in terms of the caste or the Varna system. And so the Brahmin would always rule. And even they have that problem in California now. They passed a law to outlaw Indian racism. That is racism that the Indian people who are going to school in the United States are practicing the caste system among themselves. And they just passed a law last year, I think it was, in California. Said, no, you can't have caste racism where you won't eat in the same cafeteria with somebody because their caste is supposed to be different than yours and so on. So these are the issues that we are really trying to deal with. Okay. There's another.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asante and Dr. Dav. My question is, we talk about this hierarchy as a ladder. And to me, when anybody carries ladder to any place, then there is something that they want to reach out for. And we, as blacks, Africans, both home and then diaspora, we are at the bottom of the ladder. And to me, if we can dismantle that, because ladder starts from the ground, from the beginning, and we are at the bottom. So what are we going to do to dismantle, to destroy this bottom of the ladder, so that if the rank of the ladder is destroyed at the bottom, then there is no way somebody can get to the top.
Absolutely.
So what are we going to do apart from maybe, I think Dr. Dav mentioned some, where she talked about education and other things, my art and truth. So aside this, how are Africans going to gather together, see ourselves as one, stop the bickering and the fighting amongst ourselves, and know that we have to destroy this, and nobody has to do it for us. We have to do this on our own, and we have to discard some of the things that they have put in us.
Yes, thank you very much. That's a powerful question. And I think the answer is very obvious to us. Wherever we encounter a construction of the racial ladder, we must reject it. That is the one thing we do. We have to reject the racial ladder wherever we encounter it. We have to make sure that it's important that we don't allow it to exist in our presence. I wake up in the morning ready for battle, because it's necessary. I mean, no, they are out there trying to enforce this racial ladder. And I see it in the university system. It's in the corporate world. It's in the religious world. It's the whole idea is that somebody wants to impose this system on you when you have, and this is why I mentioned about the legal system, where our people decided that there was so much against us. So many of our young people went to law school, and now we got all these young lawyers, and they're fighting this battle. They're trying to deal with the whole legal structure, and that's why Trump is probably going to go to jail, because black women lawyers are going to put him in jail. So that's because he felt like he was at the top of that ladder, and black people shouldn't have anything to say about him or do anything to him and so on. But the whole destruction, dismantling of the ladder, means that we all there's an equality here. There's an understanding that no human is above any other human. All humans have the same capabilities, and so that's where we are. So the question of how we destroy it every day in our own lives. You never let it exist. You have the courage to fight it and to be against it. Say, no, you've misjudged me. You got me wrong. I'm not your. You remember what James Baldwin said? I am not your Negro. I am not your Negro. You got the wrong Negro. So that's me. We're not your Negro. Yeah, 2 more questions and we'll be. Yeah, okay, go ahead, Doc. Go ahead, Doc.
Brothers and sisters, I'm so glad to be here, and I have a. Okay. Okay, I have a. Well, my question is because, well, these days there was the looting here in Philadelphia in Center City, and then someone from my department was the same all the time. It's like, did you realize that most of people there were black guys participating in the looting? And then it's like, and then the comment of that person was like, can you see why it's like they feed the violence against themselves? It's like, and then I was in this situation because, as an Afro-Latina, it's something that I am all the time facing in environments where are other Latin American, that they don't want to sound racist, but they are racist all the time against us, and they don't recognize our origin as Africans and our fights as Africans in Latin America. And then this discussion was basically because when we are like fighting for our rights and claiming our places as human beings, it's like at the same time this discourse that we are acting in an opposite way because our behavior is violent. You know what I mean? Yes, and then it's like in this work that we are doing here in the academy, or yes, on in these education places where we can get some important information for us, but at the moment that we are in face of these racist people, sometimes we don't know, okay, or we don't have enough. How can I say that? Like, well, enough words, or I don't know, to deal against this kind of, well, I don't know, racist discourses fed by violence. You know what I mean? Yes. Thank you so much.
Yes, please.
Okay. It's a process that we're saying, an educational process, but we have to understand how culture works, because culture feeds our minds, the way we think, believe, behave, and so on, and creates knowledge. And the thing is that we're in a situation in this zone of confluence where the dominant culture is imposed upon our minds. So we're learning every day the cultural values and beliefs of the conqueror. This is what we're taught when we go to school, when we go to university, everywhere we go, when we look at a movie, when we read a newspaper. This is all cultural information that supports the beliefs and values of the conquerors. So we are all being fed this information, and it is imposed upon us every single day. And this is why many of us, some of the youth included, are learning to despise their African humanity, learning to use the conqueror's violence against ourselves. And, and there are some men who are doing damage to women. And we can't cover that up and say we're all, this is an ancient African thing, we don't do it, and then just pretend it doesn't exist. We actually have to open it up for scrutiny and say, why are we doing this? And most of it is to do with the values and beliefs and attitudes and behaviors and thoughts and knowledge that's being imposed upon our minds. So that's what we've got to understand is happening, so that we don't see, if we use race, we can't understand, because it makes no sense. Why are black people doing this? Why are black people doing that in the racial form? Once we come to the mind, once we come to the cultural values and beliefs, we then can begin to understand what is happening, why we're thinking and doing things that are not African. We don't even know what is African. We're being taught there is nothing African but barbarism. And I'm sorry, you wanted to say something.
No, there was another question.
Oh,
okay,
right.
the last question.
Yeah.
Okay,
Or
hello.
You want to respond to what?
I'll do it in the final.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
But you, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Asante and Dr. Dav. Mine is not a question, but a contribution. And the issue of race and color struck me when I came to the US. I'm a Ghanaian, and this is the longest time I've been outside of Ghana. So it's been 3 years since I've been in the US. And I heard one day I was coming back from school and then just climbing up from the the bus from the under, how do they call it? The scepter, and then climbing subway, and then climbing up to the house, and then on my right, and I saw a group of people arguing, and they said, "You're black," and blah, 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 I'm not. And then it just dawned on me that, yes, I'm black. And yes, it's just dawned on me, and I had to sit down for a while to process it before I go home. Because in Ghana, like Dr. Asante said, we don't have black, we don't have white. Maybe you are short, you are tall, you are this ethnic group, but the issue of blackness or whiteness is not even mentioned. It's not a thing to even think about. So for me, that was something for me to process and just get myself into the system whilst in the US. Just to continue, I'm happy that when Dr. Asante was making his statement, he mentioned these human beings like the Nkrumahs, the Nyereres, the Sankares. And I was hoping to hear maybe a female in this mentioning of human beings. But sometimes it's unfortunate that we forget to mention the females who have also been part of this process. So I am happy that Dr. Nadav is one of the people I can mention, yes, apart from maybe Asante, whom I know, whom I can connect with. So if I'm mentioning names, like the human beings that I can mention, if I mention the Nyenyeres, the Sankares, the Nkrumahs, I can mention Asante and I can mention Nadav. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
No, part. Okay, just one last question.
I have to come up here because it's not coming.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Dove and Dr. Asante. In your book, Being Human Being, there was a scenario played out when the insurrectionists attacked the Capitol, where one of the insurrectionists asked the police guards, "Why are you treating me like a black man?" To me, I think that summed up everything about racism.
Absolutely.
Because in his subconsciousness,
Yes.
he has already been made to understand that this is how black people are to be treated.
Absolutely.
So,
perfect.
Now, my question is, what is the culture of the white people? Because being human being is based on culture, right? So what is the culture of white people that, for instance, as a black person, in trying to dismantle this ladder, we can tell them to embrace this culture of theirs, which maybe is human or more human than it is today?
That's a good question. I think that my answer is as short as I can make it here is that they've got to embrace the original African concepts. They have to learn. You can't aggression and assertion that comes out of the European way really allows for xenophobia, and I think Dr. Dove mentioned that. That's the fear of strangers. Africans have always had xenophilia, which is the love of strangers. You come to our house, our village, we offer you a glass of water. We come in, live, eat with us. You can come here. That's the way we've always felt. That's a culture that Europe has been away from for a long time, and they've been away from it, and that is what has given rise to when we talk about, for example, the looting in Philadelphia of the majority of black people who were doing the looting. That is the kind of I call it Viking behavior that has existed forever in Europe. That's what the Vikings did. Or the Vandals. The reason we got the word vandalize comes from Europe, is from the Vandals. It was an ethnic group, and they vandalized everything. And that's what Dr. Dove means when she says that we have taken on those cultures. What we have to do is to assert an African culture and a value which is based on harmony and balance and order and truth and righteousness and reciprocity. These are the Ma'atic concepts, and this is where Ma'aticity comes from, you see? So we can do that. And I just want to end, and I don't know, Dr. Dove, you have a last word? Are you okay? Okay. Thank you. I just want to say that on that Dr. Kimani Nehusi, who is an eminent scholar in terms of the ancient Kemetic civilization, will be speaking here on October the 15th at 4:00. Dr. Kimani Nehusi will be here on the 15th of October, and we are looking for everybody. We want to thank everybody who has come. We see new people and we see older people who are coming back to us. This is like it was pre-COVID. We're really happy to see y'all. We appreciate you so much. And I'm going to ask Dr. Dove if she doesn't mind to move to the rear and to the gallery or sign your books. Anna, Dr. Dove is coming to, your stuff is here, Dr. Dove. Dr. Dove. Okay. And let me just also thank you, Anna. Okay. Okay. Oh, I missed the lecture. And he's sitting right here, didn't even tell me. No, Hugh Clark will be here. He's a senior educator at Lotus Academy. He's going to be here October the 8th. October the 8th. That's before, don't you put down the 15th. Remember, it's October the 8th. That's actually next week. Attorney Hugh Clark will be talking about the challenges to independent black institutions. You know, our institutions, I mean, we created a lot of institutions in this country in the 60s and 70s. And some of them, they've been facing a lot of difficulties. What can we do? And what are those challenges? And I'm looking forward to his lecture. He's, you know, one of the great ones. Founded a school himself. He and Anna Walker years ago when I first came to Philadelphia. It was very famous, and in fact, we're looking forward to that. And then on the 29th, Tugu Sanusi, who is a PhD student at Temple, is introducing Nimat Ahmadi, who is the founder of the Darfur Women Action Group. She's going to be talking about the African women's struggle in Darfur and Greater Sudan. That's going to be on the 29th. We got a lot of things shaping up for us. So let me just ask one question. Are there any issues that we need to deal with? No. All right. We want to thank you, and we want to let me just give the last libation. I'm going to join Dr. Dove, and we will be signing books for those who would be interested in our books. We call upon our ancestors, far and near, the mother of our mothers, the father of our fathers, to render mercy, to bear witness for the liberation and the victory of all oppressed people forever. And we say it is done. All right. Thank you so much. Asheo.